Welcome back, everyone, to another one-on-one with Jerry Hall. Today's conversation is with a young man I met on Twitter, Noah Seidman. Now, Noah's also got a YouTube channel, and we'll put links to both his Twitter account and his YouTube channel in the description below. This actually materialized from what I thought was going to be a beef on Twitter. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but it is often that I will interpret a tweet in one particular way, missing the context completely of the originator who created the tweet. And that was the case with Noah and I. It started a little Twitter beef that was easily quashed when I said, hey, Noah, let's have a conversation and flush this out. And it was through this conversation with Noah that I come to find that he's a bright, articulate man who has all the same goals and desires that I do, maybe with some different assets. But the point is, we're more alike than we are different. And I think that's true for many of us. As I continue my journey in this space to squash tribalism and promote well-being throughout the entire digital asset community, I hope that this video will go to help create that result. This is an interesting conversation. I hope you find it interesting. Let's get right to it. It's coming up right now. So Noah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Where are you broadcasting from?
I'm out of Florida, Broward County, Miramar, Sunshine State.
Right on, right on. So, hey, I want to take the audience to how we met. Now, we met on Twitter. Here, where's my screen share? Bada bing, bada boom. Here it is. Now, David had started this tweet with, when people say XRP is worthless and it's going to zero, it gets me really tight because when I ask why, no one has an answer. And there was Noah with his answer. Sir, if you want to read it word for word, I think that's great. And then explain yourself, and then I'll come in and we'll just have an organic flow of how we started our little discourse.
It's my pleasure. So what I like to say is my skill set is the application of fundamental analysis to these technologies. Obviously, I'll give a little preface to this answer. So I firmly am a fundamentals investor in all markets and historically in the equities markets. But I have found that fundamental analysis is quite metaphorical to the crypto space. Obviously, we're dealing with technologies that don't have cash flow. There's no P&E. But we have these types of properties, the protocol properties. They're meaningful, part of the big picture. They don't tell the whole picture. It's a complicated tapestry, lots of puzzle pieces, but these properties are meaningful components of the big picture. So one thing that is a component of all blockchains, no matter what blockchain it is, it's total supply, emissions rate. Are there halvings like in Bitcoin? And it is the case with XRP that there are periodic emissions from the escrow, which increases the circulating supply on the markets. Now, this it may appear to have a negative connotation, but this is a mathematical value that does have a psychological effect on the markets. And we'll get into more of the picture as we talk, but there is a 27% inflation rate due to escrow emissions. Trivial transaction fees contribute to a negligible burn rate, which is quite meaningful if you consider like mass adoption. That burn rate is going to substantially increase if you're talking trillions and trillions of dollars. So that's quite meaningful. But as of right now, there's basically no reduction in supply, and due to the escrow emissions, there is an increase in supply. The strongest force in asset appreciation is deflationary pressure, a profound payments technology, but appreciation is not supported by fundamentals. I'll end it with currently.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation in the form of a conversation. It is often very difficult to discuss I'd say, complex topics on Twitter. Very limited, and,
No
and
doubt.
context can easily be misconstrued. So one of the things, the very first thing that I saw when I saw this in this 20%, 27% inflation rate due to escrow emissions, the first thing I thought of, well, and I'm no economist. I want to put that right out there, but I went, if total supply is 100 billion and escrow would release 1 billion per month, and there are approximately 49 billion total in various escrows, that inflation rate number didn't make sense to me. Can you expand upon that? Because I don't want to presume anything here. I'd like to get it straight from the horse's mouth.
Oh, sure. That the number just comes from, where did I, let me switch screens real quick. It's from a website. But let me find the website for the viewers, which will be useful as a resource. Crypto inflation rates. Yeah, viewbase.com/inflation. So obviously my screen is not sharing, but it says, right, so this is quite meaningful. So I said 27%, right now it's 26.94. So as with Bitcoin is a decaying inflationary asset because of the mining. There is a max supply, but there are emissions. So the supply technically relative to the current quantity is increasing. And these types of, this dynamic component of these projects is occurring with Ripple too. So there is a max supply, there is an emission, but because as those emissions are emitted, technically the inflation rate is decreasing over time. So every 1 month, this website says every 1 month, 1 billion XRP is unlocked from escrow and sold on the market to finance Ripple's operations. Unused XRP at the end of the month will be sent back to the escrow queue. It's just what they say. It's information and it's meaningful, and we take it into context and calculate.
Well, okay. So maybe the question was, maybe I don't understand the. See, I'll tell you where the premise of my thought was. Sure. The premise of my thought was, if 1 billion is released from escrow, then at max 1% of the total supply on a monthly basis can be considered an emission. And maybe that's where my disconnect is with this, because you can see in my reply, I'm like, whoa, something's off base here. I think something got missed, because possibly, from what I understand about inflation and deflation, everything's relative to the context in which it's operating. But inflation as it pertains to the supply is absolutely tied to sellers on the open market, yes, and Ripple, the company, out of escrow, putting XRP into the open market from a sale perspective, on the sale side of an order book. Okay, I get that. Yes. Totally get that. The deflationary element that's built into the code is the burn rate per transaction. Okay,
absolutely.
Right. Now, there was a wonderful tweet just a second ago. Let me see if I can find it real quick. I got this Jungle Ink thing here going. Where is it? Oh, I hate it when it does that. I had it locked on it. It was from Kikaru. Maybe it's up here. I'm sorry. We can edit this out if I can't get it in the next 5 seconds. It was this wonderful breakdown of the stats as it pertains to transactions burn on a per day, on a per month. And it was actually pretty substantial, like 100,000 XRP a month is getting burned through the transaction rate.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and actually, that'll go up, obviously, as I'm not finding it. This is ridiculous. You ever do that? Have the page that you want there, and then you come back to it, and Twitter just did what it just did, and
yep, you scroll up and it's gone. Yep,
it's gone.
I mean, but I understand. I know exactly what you're talking about, though. And then there's actually other assets that perfectly demonstrate what is most meaningful. So we have an emission rate, we have an inflation, but that could overwhelmingly be compensated by demand. 27% is not an extraordinary inflation rate. Obviously, it's large, but it's not 400% like these masternode projects from 2017 that are running around a 5,000% inflation. One of the more interesting projects that has a comparable inflation rate to XRP is synthetics currently, and synthetics is going to per the algorithms is going to settle at 2.5% inflation in 2023. So it has a decaying inflation. It's the same thing as Bitcoin. It's a decaying inflationary model, and in the code of so the different characteristics, synthetics versus XRP in this instance. So what is most interesting is the deflationary component in both protocols. They're very different though. Synthetics has the incentivized staking, which is where the inflation goes to, and the incentivized staking is locking up supply. So in fact, there's a large inflation rate for synthetics, but because it incentivizes staking, there's actually more supply being taken off the market. So there's a cumulative deflationary pressure with XRP as the market expands. There's more transactions, 100,000, a million, a billion, whatever it goes to. The burn could overwhelmingly compensate with the deflationary pressure, considering the escrow emissions. And ultimately, the escrow emissions finish, per month of
55.
55 months. It's only a
55
couple of
months.
years.
Yeah.
So there you go. So when those escrow emissions stop in a couple of years, you're talking about no more, this is 0% inflation. In fact, deflation because of the burn. You just have to have those long-term time horizons to really paint these big pictures of how these protocols will really play out in this ever-evolving global space.
No, I totally agree with that. So you and I are 100% in a line on that premise. You made a great point in a follow-up tweet. I want to read out loud for those that might be listening to this as they're walking their dog. As a currency, burn and incentivized hoarding are strong deflationary pressures. Staking achieved incentivized hoarding, period. XRP's burn rate is trivial, and there's no APY for holding. Holding is speculative based on potential price appreciation. Adoption is not deflationary.
Well,
I'm not
so
sure if that's necessarily a true statement. I agree with everything right up until the point where you say adoption is not deflationary, because adoption, well, wait, if adoption has supply and demand metrics included, in other words, more adoption means more demand, well, we know we're dealing with a fixed supply. So obviously it has an inflationary, it just by the sheer nature of that premise, it has to have an asset appreciation element to it.
so the adoption is not deflationary is the wrong is a wrong statement.
Yeah, don't bring that stuff into my house again, mister.
No, so what was the so no, but I just it's the wrong word. What was the I literally just thought of the word. There's oh, I used the wrong word. Speculation is not deflationary.
Correct.
That's the right word. So, but adoption means more transactions, which means the programmatic burn is
Correct.
going to decrease supply. So, adoption technically is deflationary. So, it was the wrong word, but the sentiment.
The
and
sentiment
that's why
is correct. And see, now we could have never, or it would have been very frustrating to try to work this out on Twitter. What do you think?
Impossible. Absolutely impossible.
So, I'm curious. I want to pick your brain a little bit because I think it really goes to the kind of the essence of what a lot of folks are in this space trying to do, as well as the equity space. I don't really think there's a difference with what I'm about to say, and that is this. The tried and true methods of price discovery, although the mechanics are still there, right? The mechanisms are still there. The underlying game or rules of engagement in this milieu have changed.
Cool.
And so what I've been trying to wrap my brain around is since about 2008, with the advent of this, let's create bonds, let's sell bonds to anybody that will buy them, and anybody that does, you know, the people that won't buy them, if the market doesn't buy them, then the Fed will backstop them and life is great. Okay, I get that from the government. However, what I don't get is how skewed it's made price discovery.
There is almost no so price discovery is interesting because price discovery, in my mind, especially with regard to certain crypto projects that are above all-time high, the second you get past all-time high, you're entering price discovery. And with regard to equities, that not just historically, not just logically, really should rationally be based on fundamentals. P&E. Frankly, I can't. It makes me nauseous when I see anything above a P&E of 1 because that's obviously an inflated valuation. It has nothing to do with fundamentals. It's speculative in all regards. So, what is price discovery? We get into really all these incredible philosophical conversations and topics. I don't know. I don't have the answers.
And I don't either. And that's the thing. And I'll tell you, I follow some pretty bright folks, okay? And that seems to be at the core of what's really going on. One of the biggest questions is, what is price discovery now? We're in an economic world where, you know, you've got one set of numbers, right? And then you've got what's nominal, you know, adjusted for inflation, adjusted for this, adjusted for that. and which of these, you know, quote unquote adjustment mechanisms do you apply to this versus that? Because everything is kind of interrelated. I mean, anything that has to do with money.
Frankly, everything then, the world, it's all connected.
Exactly. So it's really crazy. And so when and this all goes back to David's tweet, where he stated when people ask him or tell him XRP is going to 0, but they can't explain why, I honestly can't explain how it would go to 100. But you know, on the same token, I can't explain that it will go to 0. It's we're in this kind of infancy again. It's like we're rediscovering some of these tried and true, you know, what you would say, fundamental valuation tools.
Yes, well said. And much of this comes from my gut, a feeling based on it's not speculative. It's based on properties and the tendencies of properties to push things in different directions, and these properties that push things in different directions affect psychology, affect people's minds. Listen, social media has an effect on the price of assets, and that's meaningful. So that comes into the calculation. How the sentiment that is currently permeating the space plays into price discovery, potential releases or upgrades or features or adoption, no doubt. So all these go into these instincts that I feel, and I conversate on my YouTube channel often nowadays about various assets. I have various opinions, short-term as well as long-term, about XRP. And there's obviously the complexity with the relationship between XRP and the company, but that's mutually exclusive because the asset unto itself has a functionality, it has supply, it has demand, it has trading and liquidity and volume, and it has all these fundamental properties, which will ultimately be affected by deals that Ripple has for this asset, and when it's consumed to a greater degree. And as I've said, and it is the case, it makes the legacy financial system look pathetic. And there's a lot of technologies that do. So it is definitely a competitive space. Some of the biggest things XRP has going for it is who played? Didn't Swift do something with XRP? So
Well, there have been some dots made. There's no official partnership that I'm aware of. I have heard Swift people talk about DLT, talk about Ripple's stuff, but there is no like official Swift Ripple partnership.
But you see, this is exactly what I mean. So therefore, any news of that nature causing appreciation or depreciation is all speculative, and that's why, to really get through all the FUD and all the insanity of all the P&Es greater than one, so to speak, in crypto land, that's why I really appreciate these fundamental protocol properties. And XRP is totally, obviously there's distinctions between fixed supply. It's already been minted, but that's very comparable to the ERC-20s. And you'll have the proof of work camp where there's the honorable distribution, but Bitcoin has overwhelming mining centralization in certain parts of the world. So it just gets very murky and a lot of uncertainties, but we still have these fundamental properties: inflationary pressures, deflationary pressures. And that's really what I come back to quite often when I choose my investment strategies.
Sure. And I'm much the same. Cost to carry, right? Cost to carry. How about network overhead, right? You and I have overhead in our lives that are concerned to our personal balance sheets, right? On a monthly, annualized basis sometimes. So do protocols. Every protocol has a cost of doing business to it. It's important to kind of try to understand what those things are, because obviously none of them are static. Most of them, are going to be relative to the transaction value of that particular network, what have you. And then obviously it's total participant pool, whether it's from a consumer doing a transaction or an actual person running a validator, or in a proof of work case, a mining rig, what have you. So, I love meeting folks like you that aren't necessarily waving any one flag and saying that this is the thing. Although in full transparency, I want to tell you, I am a huge XRP bull. I'm a huge Cardano bull. I'm a huge VeChain bull. These are projects that I see are doing the kind of things from a management team perspective, from a protocol level perspective, and the acquisition and integration of their protocols into the greater world through partnerships with who I believe mostly are legitimate companies going to help move the tech further.
Yes, I agree.
So that's kind of my premise of where I come from. Does that mean I dislike Bitcoin? No, not at all. Does that mean that I dislike EOS or any token? No, I don't. I just choose not to focus on them because they're not where I have my money.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that, and I understand that. Same for myself. It plays a big part in the things we spend time on. We have a vested interest in these things. Well, what's most interesting, I agree, and so this is one of the most important things that I think about. A statement that I say constantly on my show: you can't spread too thin and never go all in. This is like portfolio balance. Believe me, if I had more liquidity, more value, more money — I hate that word, that's another story — I would have more assets. And then another principle that I focus on heavily is gut instinct time frames. When are things likely to substantially appreciate? Because I need to focus my portfolio on things that are more likely. It's never certainties. It's either more likely or less likely to appreciate in a shorter time frame, because then I could accumulate more resources, spread it out, and apply it to other types of investments. I would, so with regard to, here's another interesting thing that I think about quite often. There's three things for inevitabilities. One, the technology needs to work. Every project that you're playing with, unless it's a random 2017 Masternode project, the technology works. Two, it needs to be profitable. Then profitable is either it makes a company money or it saves them money, because that just is still a positive effect on the bottom line. And three, we have to assess how disruptible the target market is. And that, number three, is time frame. Just like electric cars, it's taken a long time, and it's finally become disruptible because it's so damn cheaper when you mass produce them to produce and get profit off an electric car. They just got to scale the shit out of it. And then it's so much cheaper for maintenance. So it's easier to sell than a gas vehicle. The vehicles will be cheaper and it's easier to manufacture, so there's more profit. FUD aside and opinions aside and allegiance aside, that's the mathematics of why it's an inevitability, and the time frame is getting closer and closer. The same thing is the case when I think about assets like XRP. What is the target market? Transactions and payment processing. So we have a very, very ancient, entrenched industry that has a vested interest in not allowing disruption. It's like disrupting politics. So I see it as an inevitability, but as I structure my portfolio, that would be a more longer term play.
Sure.
That's just how I balance the potential timeframes. Like, look, obviously, DeFi is crazy right now because people can make money, and it's not just appreciation of the asset. We're talking about recurring revenue streams. So this really has an imminent capacity to disrupt banking, because if you could lend money and earn APY on one value that you're lending, and someone could borrow and achieve a leveraged position, that is the fundamental purpose of a bank. And that's just coming out hard right now.
It sure is. Now, I think it's a loaded gun. I really do.
Sure.
I can't substantiate a lot of this because it's kind of coming from my gut, but just from a common sense perspective, much of the DeFi space to me appears to be smoke and mirrors.
Yes.
And until a company like Celsius, and I'm calling you out, Nexo, I'm calling you out, Cred Earn, I'm calling you out, until you can show your books,
right,
and show that there is a sustainable model. Now that's the key word, sustainable model of how you're able to supply either your investors or your creditors with the returns that you're currently offering. I have to assume you're a Ponzi scheme. Now, I want to preface this, you're in good company, because almost every government on the planet is running the same exact Ponzi scheme. So it's not like, you're these evil little couple, three DeFi companies, but it's the same old smoke and mirror, song and dance bullshit that we've seen in finance predominantly over the last 15, 16, 18 years.
I appreciate the sentiment, and it's not, and it's overwhelmingly valid. And these are the first things that anyone would think when they see even a bank loan. I mean, this is applicable to the CDOs and CLOs, and it's all smoke and mirrors. But here's what's so fascinating that took me a fair amount of time to finally wrap my head around. Bank reserves are at 0%. Dodd-Frank was higher than that. So that means every single loan that anyone issues is an under collateralized loan. So when it's under collateralized and it defaults, all that burden is placed on the lender. What's happening in the DeFi space, it's all all of it is over collateralized. You got to put up 125%, 150%, which means in a default scenario, the position gets liquidated. Or if there's fluctuation in the value of the collateral asset, the position's liquidated. And to keep the loan active, the borrower may have to provide more collateral depending on the value of the asset. But what's most profound and is very obvious in my mind, disruptive of traditional banking, is in a default scenario, there is zero burden on the lender. There's no systemic risk. The over collateralization places like 99.5. Obviously, if there's like the value of the asset gets cut in half, sure, there could be systemic risk, but it's like 99.5%. The burden of the default is on the borrower because they provided over collateralization.
And that's true. And I'm not really speaking to that. That is not really at all what I was speaking to. I'll give you the for instance. This is just the quick back of the envelope thing. When I go to a DeFi platform and I see that I can borrow, right, at 5%, but I can also loan my assets and receive 10%, that's a disconnect.
Yeah, what's that called? That's called, it's Contango. That's called Contango. So this has...
is that Spanish for bullshit?
Well, this happens, and this is exactly what happens in the futures markets. When the future value of the asset is cheaper than the future spot, and it's Contango. And what's so fascinating to me about the DeFi, and in some regards, it does have the smell of bullshit, and at minimum, it's extraordinarily comparable to traditional finance. And then the opposite of this, what you presented is 5% to borrow, 10% to lend. What happens if that's called a carry trade in traditional finance? When you could borrow for less than you can lend, and you're pocketing the difference. So it has complete precedent in legacy finance, and that's the whole point. The whole point is, DeFi destroys these companies because you're eliminating human resources, you're eliminating paperwork, and clearly there's potential systemic risk with the algorithms. But as it matures and we have baseline algorithms that have known functionality and assured stability, it takes some time, takes some failures, but that's software. We iterate towards that. We have HR, facilities, buildings, maintenance, everything eliminated for 50 developers that write a piece of code.
Oh, there's no, I'm not doubting the massive disruptive force that is coming this way. There are a couple of barriers that I have, it's anybody Ray Charles could identify them. And that is confidence.
Yes.
And it's going to be the user experience for onboarding and offboarding. Now, personal experience, because I like to investigate things, I've tried to create a Celsius account.
Yes.
I'm a fairly proficient person. I can create an email and send it. You and I have exchanged emails. I'm on Twitter. I'm able to create and use voice over and video IP. Hence, you're watching it right now. But I can't get a friggin' Celsius account created.
It's a pain in the neck, huh?
Well, they're having all kinds of issues with my passport photo that I keep taking these stupid photos and sending them, and them telling me they're not good enough. And when I go to their support, all I get is, that has to go through the app.
The software. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we can't help you. Well, I'll tell you what, Celsius, if you want to have access to the larger than 35 million crypto geeks on the planet, you better get that kind of stuff worked out. Because I'm telling you, the people that do will be the people that get the business, not the people that say, you've got to make it work yourself on the app. We're not here to help you.
I agree.
That's just the truth.
So these are small companies, and I think from a company perspective, that's a cool endeavor. I mean, they're attempting, pursuing, disrupting status quo processes,
Oh
and
yeah.
that's cool. And the over collateralization, the same with DeFi, Celsius, BlockFi, Nexo. They're not DeFi. They're CeFi. It's a
Okay.
centralized
I'm
entity.
sorry. I apologize.
No doubt, but it's the same principle.
Right.
They're taking over collateralization, which is basically eliminating almost all of their systemic risk mathematically and economically. So their books and all those things are concerns. Why? Because it's a centralized organization, and they could get 8% for a lender because they're probably charging 12% on the loan, and that's just how
But they're
they.
not. That's the point.
So then it must be incentivized.
That's what exactly. Okay. That's the ticket. See, I told you in the beginning, if I want to borrow, I can borrow at this low 5% rate. If I want to lend to my crypto, I can get 10% APR. Wait a second.
It's not sustainable.
That's not sustainable.
Oh
It's
no,
just
it
not
has to.
sustainable. And so until somebody shows me their books and shows me their model for sustainability, I'm not going to get too excited about it because I've seen Ponzi schemes my entire life.
It's not. I'll elaborate why it's not Ponzi. It's very temporary. It's identical to REITs, providing 110% of their income as returns for the REIT. It's not sustainable. But they have investors that have supplied all this liquidity, and what they're doing is bootstrapping. It's not sustainable, and what happens is when it reaches the threshold of the economic person saying, yeah, we got to pull the plug, that's when the returns, the APY for the lenders drops to 2%, and they're given loans for 6%, but that's
or the platform closes, taking the money and running.
Centralized authority. Yes, that's the problem.
And that is what that's my whole crux with this. I'm not against these places. Believe me, I'm not. I'm not anti anything. But I'm definitely pro know what the friggin' heck you're putting your money into.
Yes.
I've got a lot of friends in this community that have trusted hundreds of thousands of dollars to platforms that they have no real recourse to if they close their door.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Listen,
you and I both know in a mass calamity event, these quote unquote insurances, there is, come on, in a mass calamity event, which means the business closes their door, there is no insurance company. It went belly up. It's gone.
Every man for themselves. They take what they can and run.
And I just want people to understand this risk.
Yes, I absolutely agree. But this brings up let me give my daughter water. I'm sorry, everyone viewing, 2 seconds because she keeps barking. So this brings up a very interesting thought that's always on my mind, especially with what's going on with the money printer. I have absolutely zero trust whatsoever in equities currently. Position zero trust.
I have no way to understand what the heck is going on. Noah, I need to break it here, and I'll tell you why.
Sure.
I've got a live stream I'm doing.
Okay.
In 51 minutes, and I've got to get. Do not have my shit together. So why don't we do this? We'll do a pause.
Sure.
We'll do a quick close. I can edit this part out, and you and I can pick this up again maybe on your. Is crypto a part of your channel?
Yeah, that's the only thing I talk about, my investment strategy.
Maybe we can do a part 2 on your channel and bring over some of my viewers over to your platform.
I would very much enjoy it. I think you bring a great perspective and insight to the topics that I talk about all the time.
Well, let's do it, okay? And let's do a little pause-a-rooney. Wow, Noah, I'm going to need to break it right here, but I want to say, hey, let's pick this up on your channel for part 2. What do you say?
Be a pleasure. I think we've hit on some very exciting and interesting topics, stuff that is obviously relevant to folks that are listening to you, folks that listen to me, and it'd be wonderful to continue it. We got great stuff to talk about, everyone.
All right. I am so happy to hear that. So, folks, thanks for tuning into another one-on-one with Jerry Hall. And until next time, Pura Vida.